So, hello everybody, and welcome to this episode of CFO 4.0. And I'm hoping my voice is familiar to you by now, but you also might recognize the voice of my next guest. So, Ash Noah has been on a regular guest on the podcast. He's a fabulous speaker and always brings some brilliant insights. So, for those of you that haven't heard his dulcet tones, he is Managing Director for CIMA and AICPA. And as we literally were talking behind the podcast, is a global individual, having worked across, 11 countries across the world, are currently residing in the US. And he is responsible for both the professional qualifications within AICPA and CIMA and also ESG, which is the topic we're going to talk about today. So welcome, Ash. I'm so glad to have you back on the show.
Hannah, it's absolutely fantastic to be back. Good to see you. Good to be talking to you. And I've seen CFO 4.0 really taking off. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you. I know, well, it's not me. It's all of our fabulous listeners that are listening to this podcast right now. So Ash, one of the things that we really want to talk about today is ESG. And I think we should perhaps start with, what is the perspective from CIMA on the impact of ESG on the finance profession specifically?
Well, what I would say is, as a profession, as a finance profession, there are some key developments over the years. The ERP being one of them, that fundamentally changed how accounting was done across the enterprise. Technology, the more recent BI tools in terms of automation and predictive analytics, and all of these have been really fantastic tools that have propelled the finance function forward, and the adoption of technology and bringing technology experts in and data scientists and data engineers in and really leverage data has changed finance and changed what finance can do so significantly. But ESG is a completely different, I don't want to call it an animal, but it really is something that will fundamentally change how business is done across the world. Because businesses are in business to create value. Businesses are all about creating value. And this move to multi-stakeholder value creation is what ESG has propelled. So we're no longer looking at total shareholder returns as value creation, but total societal impact. So that shift from total shareholder return, TSR, to TSI, total societal impact, is how value is going to be looked at, how value is going to be judged by society. And so we're at the precipice of a massive change in how value itself is defined, and how value is defined by investors, how value is defined by society. And then the knock-on effect of that is that total shareholder returns was all mainly about financial management, whereas total societal impact is also going to include sustainability management. And so we roll ESG and sustainability into one and say that value creation and value generation, value protection, or value erosion is going to be about financial capital, but also the non-financial capitals. And we can talk a little bit more about that. And that fundamentally changes the role of finance. It fundamentally is a burning platform in terms of who is going to integrate reporting that includes sustainability management. And anything and everything to do with reporting eventually lands in the CFO's office. And if you want reporting that is accurate, that is consistent, that is comparable, and has all these fantastic characteristics that finance brings to the table to produce financial reports, the same level of discipline needs to be applied to sustainability reports. And so we see sustainability management, sustainability reporting to squarely land in the CFO's office, and the finance function being responsible for that. And it's an amazing opportunity for finance going forward. And we can unpack that a little bit more as we go into this podcast.
Absolutely. And I want to just dig into one of the things you talked about there, which is about non-financial capital. Can you just explain that to our listeners, what you mean by that?
Right. So the concept of integrated reporting has been around for at least a decade. And the integrated reporting is about bringing financial views and non-financial views together. And the non-financial views are around the ability of enterprise to create value in the long term. And so that's about having a strategy, having capability to execute a strategy and to actually operationalize your strategy. And so that brings into the picture the non-financial capitals like the intellectual capital. A lot of the intellectual capital resides in your human capital, in your relationship capital. So relationship with suppliers, relationship with your customers, relationship with your regulators. And then there is a natural capital. For example, Coca-Cola or Pepsi might be using water as a natural resource, and that's an essential input into their business model to create value. So you're using natural resources. Or if you're an oil and gas company, and they're called energy companies now, again, your natural capital is such a big element of what they do as a business model. And so the traditional capitals, manufactured capital, which is all your plant and machinery or your software, or your hardware and things like that, that are very much involved in processing raw materials so that they become finished products or inputs to services that become services. So that's financial capital in terms of your hard financial capital plus your manufactured capital is typically represented by net assets in your balance sheet. Now, history has shown us that net asset compared to the total enterprise value has been shifting exponentially. So in the 70s, 80% of the value of an enterprise used to be in the net assets. But today, if you look at net assets of companies in the S&P 500, it's only 10% of the enterprise value is in the balance sheet. So the other 90% of the value is in its intellectual property, human capital, in its social relationship capital, etc. And so when I talked about the opportunity earlier, the opportunity is in these non-financial capitals, which is, if you think about human capital, natural capital, intellectual, social capital, these are all the dimensions of ESG and sustainability. And so there's this real exciting platform that is being provided for finance and finance professionals to say, okay, I'm really good at financial reporting. I'm really good at the financial capital and non-financial capital. But now, if I can get my head around and get new competencies in ESG and sustainability, and I embrace sustainability management as a part of business management and value generation, that gives me an entire new opportunity to engage in value creation.
And that's a huge shift. Just hearing you talk about it is really exciting, to be fair, Ash. And again, so many questions, but let's focus in on. So it feels like with sustainability, particularly in ESG, that there is a growing awareness that finance needs to get involved. And certainly I've had lots of conversations in different areas, a couple on the podcast, all about it. But what I feel like is we've not really felt the wave of ESG hitting us. So what does the horizon look like for the next 12 to 18, 24 months for the impact of, all of the new ESG initiatives on finance in particular?
So I'll start off with, what is really, really close to a finance professional. And we all know IFRS. We all know the reporting standards that IFRS issues, and all our accounting and reporting are based on predominantly IFRS plus your local GAAP, whether you're in the UK or US, there's local GAAP. In the US, especially, it's US GAAP, not IFRS. But Internationally, the IFRS is the body that issues accounting standards, the IFRSs and the IASs. Now, in 2021, COP26 in Glasgow, it fundamentally changed the future of ESG and sustainability with regards to standards, because the ISSB was formed, which is the International Sustainability Standards Board. So you have the IASB, which is a part of the IFRS Foundation, the International Accounting Standards Board. Alongside that, we now have the International Sustainability Standards Board with equal voice, equal authority in terms of issuing sustainability standards. That's a big shift. And that is what is going to cascade into a series of changes for our future. And it'll produce the level of changes that I, as a finance professional, Hannah, we as finance professionals have not seen happen in our lifetimes. And I don't think we'll see this type of a change happen in the rest of our lives. And so the existence of ISSB, which has already issued IFRS S1 and IFRS S2, the first two standards have been issued for comment, and they should be finalized very, very soon. Will start requiring companies to start reporting the non-financial information or sustainability information that is material to an enterprise in the coming years. A lot of the EU regulations are way ahead than the US. The SEC is still talking about regulations around reporting of sustainability information. Still a lot of debate there. But in Europe, by 2024, we are seeing the requirement legally to start reporting sustainability information. So anything that is financially material to an enterprise will have to be reported. And the change is going to hit many of us. The thresholds of requirement of reporting is quite low. And so one way or the other, whether it's the banks that require you to submit sustainability information based on those standards, or it's your investors who are asking for that, or if you're a supplier to a major corporation, that corporation might require you to complete sustainability information based on these standards. So one way or the other, most of the finance function will be deeply involved in reporting sustainability information. Now, I just want to also highlight that sustainability is not just about reporting, right? Reporting is a part of and an outcome of the sustainability management processes within an organization. I think the fundamental reason why finance needs to sit up and pay attention to ESG is because, like I said before, the way an enterprise creates value is going to change. How value is defined by the stakeholders is changing. If we start thinking about total societal impact and the fact that we are responsible not just for producing profits, but we are responsible to manage sustainability in a way where the societal impact is maximized in terms of value creation. Finance needs to think about risk management around sustainability factors. They need to be able to understand all the stakeholders involved in sustainability management. So it's your suppliers, it's your supply chain, it's your customers. And so, for example, banks lending patterns are changing. The way they're charging interest is changing depending upon who they want to do business with. So their business models are taking into account. If we are lending to industries that are not as compliant, they might charge. I'm choosing my words carefully. They might charge extra interest. And companies that are green and companies that are ESG friendly, they might actually get a benefit in terms of the cost of lending. So the cost of capital to certain types of organizations might become cheaper. So there's going to be shifts around your cost of capital. There'll be shifts around what type of risks your enterprise faces. And if you as a CFO are involved in risk management, you absolutely have to take into account these stakeholders. You've got to start identifying ESG material factors. So anything which could financially impact your organization, which is ESG related, has to be on your dashboard, and you have to start managing waste management and look at clean energy management and look at business travel. And there's so many other angles which impact an organization and fundamentally changes its business model. And as a CFO, you need to be deeply engaged with that business model. So I don't want finance professionals hearing this podcast to think, oh, this is a reporting requirement and there are reporting standards and, this is all about reporting. Yes, it is about reporting, but it really is about enabling your organization to create value. It's about sustainability management, which is so closely linked to the financial performance of an entity. You cannot separate the two. The better an enterprise is at sustainability management, the better it'll be in business management and the financial outcomes. So the finance leader really has to be engaged in all aspects of sustainability management. I am not saying we need to become climate scientists. We need to become biodiversity engineers. But what I'm saying is we need to understand these type of impacts. We need to be able to interface with these scientists. We need to be able to understand the business impacts of biodiversity, the business impacts of climate change, the business impacts of DEI, and engage with these experts. We need to be then translating the impacts into financial terms for our enterprises. That's the role we play. And so my appeal and my challenge to finance professionals is don't take ESG as just, I need to learn how to report it, but we need to understand ESG. We need to understand ESG and sustainability as a business issue.
Yeah, because that is the first place I think a lot of finance professionals go, especially at the moment, is with ESG. It's all about, what do I need to report? How can I track? How can I see and understand the values? But as you say, ESG is actually changing what we consider value. So that's something I wanted to explore, because you've mentioned, we said, I think right at the beginning of the podcast, ESG is going to change what we perceive value as. It's going to change how we measure, how we understand value of businesses. So just, could you expand on that a little?
Absolutely, Hannah. At the last podcast, we spoke about finance becoming these value partners. And the whole ESG sustainability platform is an ideal platform for finance to now start participating in and really use that platform to leverage their position as value partners. What ESG sustainability is doing, like I said, is fundamentally changing your business model and how value is defined, how value is created, how value is delivered, and how value is captured. And that's all about how it impacts your business model. So your business model is about defining value, creating value, delivering value, and capturing that value. If you think about the elements of the business model, and I'm going to start breaking this down, there are fundamentally four major elements. There's the customer value proposition, is why the business exists. Then to power up that customer value proposition, you have a set of activities that change the inputs into raw materials and inputs of services into finished products. And that's all around your manufacturing processes or your service processes. So that's another bucket. Where finance does get involved in manufacturing, in standard costs, in driving margins, etc., in efficiency of those processes. So there's a whole box of processes in the business model. The other key box is around relationships, and that's relationships with suppliers, customers, regulators. And yes, we do investor relations, and that's the only part we kind of engage in that business model. And then the outcome of all of that is costs and revenues. And that is the box we really are as happy as pigs in mud. And we are always in that box. And we are all about P&Ls, balance sheets, controls, accounting, and being business partners in that profit generation. But beyond those four and beyond the cost and revenues, where I would say finance spends 90% of its time. And but the challenge is, let's look at customer value proposition, and let's look at why do the customers buy from us? How do we differentiate our products and services? How can we deliver new value to the customer through new value propositions, through new ways of service deliveries? And that will resonate with you, Hannah, because that's kind of the whole business transformation equation, where business transformation is not about implementing technology, but it's about how you serve your customers in new ways. And that's creating this ecosystem and a platform of a digital ecosystem that enables the enterprise. So are you engaging in that intellectual capital of creating that platform and creating new capabilities in how you serve the customer? That's where value is being created. Costs and revenues is accounting for the value that has been created. It's not value creation in itself. The other elements, strategy and culture. Are you enabling a culture of innovation? Are you driving a culture that enables innovation, that enables disruption, not just disrupting the market, but also disrupting your own business? Is finance strong enough? Are they participating in that? And then, are you participating in the strategy of the organization, in how it's going to serve its customers, how it's going to operate in the market? So these are the dimensions. These are the 7 dimensions: the customer value proposition, the processes, the relationships, costs and revenues, culture, strategy, and then the digital platform. And all of these elements are really speaking again to the intangible capitals. So if you look at the business model and you think about customer value proposition, that is value creation, but that is about a stakeholder, your customer, and how the customer perceives value, and whether your products and services are delivering value, and how you can increase that value creation. So suddenly, the focus of finance is not on costs and revenues, but it is engaging in the element of value creation around new propositions for your stakeholder, in how perhaps you deliver, green products, or you deliver sustainable products, and the cost of manufacturing that changes, and the pricing that changes. Are customers prepared to pay more for a sustainable product? It's those type of discussions, new product development, innovation of new products that deliver sustainable products. Those are the areas where finance, through the ESG lens, can start to participate. And so that is what the proposition is that I'm putting forward, that when you look at ESG and sustainability, beyond just reporting, it opens up many avenues for finance leaders, for CFOs to participate in, to really guide their businesses through this massive sea of change in this value creation, and really position yourself as the value partner.
And it's really exciting to start feeling this change, because as you said, we start with reporting. I think, behavior starts by reporting on the current state of play. And then we start to obviously understand the metrics by which we measure value and the way that we can understand it. And then it does drive behavior change. And I think that's what I'm seeing and I'm feeling when I'm speaking to customers, is that they're becoming aware that this is growing as a way of measuring value, as a way that they are being measured both internally and externally. Like we talked about employee value, we talked about customer value, we talked about, capital. assessment and measurement. And I guess because of the changes you mentioned in the standard, etc., that there's some very short-term impacts potentially on how we need to enable our teams and our finance teams to measure. So these new standards that are coming out, could you just give us an overview on what they mean for measurement within finance?
So the new standards, so S1 is about all aspects of non-financial reporting. So those are sustainability reporting that is financially material to your organization. It lays out the standards of non-financial reporting. That's the S1. The S2 is specifically around climate reporting, and it's specifically around reporting your emissions. And so it talks about scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. Scope 3 is your supply chain in terms of what is the carbon footprint and what is the usage of what is the measure of emissions of your entire supply chain. And that's the most controversial measure because it gets really subjective. So these requirements are still under discussion. There's still a lot of comments being gathered by the ISSB. And then there's scope 1 and scope 2. Scope 2 is your energy usage. It's the usage of your enterprise directly in terms of the fuel you're burning, the energy you're using in your buildings, etc. And scope 1 is pretty much for those that are generating electricity, for those that are actually in industries that are themselves generating the usage of carbon. So most of us will be reporting scope 2 and scope 3 emissions. And so the S2, IFRS S2 is all about your emissions reporting, and it has a very detailed requirements that and how you report your emissions. So it's very much climate reporting, S2, and S1 is the foundation of all reporting around sustainability information. I want to move away from calling it non-financial. We've been used to calling anything that is anything that is not financial as non-financial, but the way IFRS wants to define sustainability information is not as non-financial, but anything that is financially material sustainability information is the technical term. And that's it lays out the rules in S1 as to how that should be reported. So we've got to pay attention as finance leaders, understand S1, S2, and soon there will be S3, S4, etc. So what we will be seeing is a very, very fast-paced production of a standard, issuance for comments, exposure drafts, and then being confirmed very quickly. Typically, accounting standards take up to 5 years to be actually become a requirement. But when we look at sustainability standards, this is going to be really quick. This will be turned around in a matter of 1 year cycles or 18-month cycles, not the 5-10 year cycles which we've seen in the past. So they will be fast implementation and a very, very accelerated requirement for reporting. That's what we will be seeing coming. So Hannah, let's just define the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions, which will be required. So the scope 1 emission really is about emissions from sources that an organization owns itself or it controls directly. So it could be like your fleet, you're burning fuel in your fleet of vehicles. Obviously, if they're not EV, electric vehicles, that would be a scope 1 emission example. A scope 2 emission is when a company is using energy that it purchases or which it consumes. So, for example, that'll be your electricity bill that your building is consuming, etc. And then scope 3 emission is the emissions that are not produced by the organization itself. And so that is a result of your suppliers consuming energy and assets that are outside of your control. If you have subcontractors, etc. So if you buy or you buy services from a subcontractor who's running a truck, or you're using suppliers who are using electricity, all of that is captured in Scope 3. So Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3 type emissions are defined in the standard. Then moving on to the requirements, the UK has very specific requirements in terms of what is to be reported under climate-related financial disclosures. So the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, the TCFD, recommended these, and actually from the financial year 22, so that was 6th of April 22, about 1,300 of the largest UK companies and financial institutions, it became mandatory to start disclosing climate-related financial disclosures. And this has also moved on, and it is going to include the larger companies in the UK. So private companies who have over 500 employees or who have more than £500 million turnover, they will be required to start disclosing climate-related financials as well. And so you might not realize this, but this is becoming mandated and become a law. And from 2023, a lot of this information will need to be captured and disclosed. As far as Europe is concerned, it's the European regulator that is looking at the CSRD, which is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. That came into effect, and rules started to come into effect from June 2022. But the actual phasing is starting from January 1, 24. So that's coming up for large EU or EU listed companies. And so the CSRD directive is what is driving the EU reporting. And so January 24 is the date when a lot of your organizations, if you're a EU subsidiary or an EU company, you will have to start reporting climate-related disclosures.
And do you know what's interesting is that is an awful lot quicker, I think, than most people would anticipate in terms of speed to actually having to, because it doesn't just impact the actual organizations, because as you said, in the scope of the standards is a lot about their suppliers and subcontractors, which means that this is actually going to roll down incredibly quickly to those medium and small businesses that actually sit underneath those larger companies,
who will be required to report to the larger corporations, so that the larger corporation can incorporate their emissions in their Scope 3, which is required. So it's a pretty wide dragnet to capture as much of the sustainability information as possible.
So do you think, because obviously this is a massive change for finance, not only reporting, as we said, in the understanding and the evaluation of value, what impact do you think that's going to have on the skill set that finance need moving forwards? Is there an immediate impact? Are we able to just, shift the skill set and repurpose existing skills? Or is there a new skill set that we actually need to develop in finance to be able to deal with this?
You framed that question really, really well, because obviously when it comes to reporting, we have it down pat, right? We know how to exercise internal controls over financial reporting. So ICFR is not, it's not foreign to us. We know how to report accurately, consistently, and fairly. And that skill set can easily be lifted and dropped on ESG related data. So we can use our disciplines, we can use our training, we can use our experience in producing accurate, timely, meaningful, consistent reports. And so if you look at all the functions in an organization, the finance function, the accounting function would be the ideal function to go to in terms of getting ESG reporting right, getting ESG reporting accurate, consistent, etc. So that's a skill set we have. Now, going beyond the new competencies that are required, I would say are more in understanding the obviously knowing the standard. So every new accounting standard that comes, finance, accounting professionals are able to look at the standard and see how it applies to your organization. We'll have to do the same with the environmental standards and the sustainability standards. But the catch there is that we will have to understand the standard as it applies to these sustainability issues. And so if there are issues around scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, so for example, the new competency required would be really to understand exactly what is scope 1, what is scope 2, what is scope 3, and then use our expertise in producing the data, connecting the data flows, capturing the information, extracting the information so that it's accurate, and then presenting it in KPIs, in reports, in all the other reporting requirements accurately. But the new skill would be to understand what is carbon net zero, what is GHG, what is a greenhouse gas, how do we ensure that we actually track the right types of energy usage. Then going beyond that, let's say you're an industry that has to report on your impact on biodiversity. And so what is biodiversity? And be able to speak to an expert on biodiversity. And then as you're doing your environmental analysis, as you're evaluating your ecosystem, you need to be able to identify these aspects that are sustainability related, but your organization actually is impacted by. Another aspect to start learning about is double materiality. So accountants have always lived in the world of materiality, which means, what are the external factors that are material to me that I need to recognize that are material financially to my organization? And I've been really good at reporting those. But if you think about the European directive, it actually requires you to account for double materiality, which means it's not just the impact that the external factors have on your enterprise, but it's also about the impacts that your enterprise has on the externals. So for example, the environment. So if there's anything that is material financially, which is impacting the environment or impacting a third party, impacting human dimension or impacting biodiversity, etc., that needs to be reported as well. So all these are new areas that finance professionals need to learn about. And as I said before, you don't need to become climate scientists, biodiversity experts, but you need to be able to understand how those impact your enterprise and what are the implications, the business implications, the value implications, and the financially material implications on your business model, and then guiding your business through these, uncharted waters, and being a key partner to the management, to the CEO, is what finance needs to do. And so the new areas of competency, some of them are brand new and some of them need to be dialed up. So your ability to understand your business model, your ability to understand how you capture value, how you deliver value, how you create value, all of those aspects we've always participated in, but now there's a heightened need for that competency. So some competencies will be required at a higher level and are heightened, and then there are some new competencies.
And so I can imagine lots of CFOs sitting and listening to this, all those that are in finance going, okay, right, this is another thing to add on the massive list of priorities. We've just dealt with COVID. We've just dealing with the constant threat of recession, challenges of cash flow and funding, right? So the question I have to ask you, Ash, on their behalf is, how much of a priority is this? And should we be doing things now so that we are prepared for the change that is coming? At what point do we need to kick in and start getting our hands dirty and into these standards and understanding them and the impact they're going to have on our business?
It is obviously a massive impact on the finance function. It's a pretty significant impact on the entire profession, but also on the CFO, on the CFO's team, added responsibility. And also, I would say the way to look at it is it's a massive opportunity. So we can approach this from two angles, as I said before. One is, hey, we need to understand the reporting. We'll make sure we have the reporting frameworks, and we will make sure we report the metrics and the KPIs and be a reporter of information. And the other way to look at it is, this is a massive opportunity for me to really engage finance at the front end of the business, and engage in business model transformation through the impacts of ESG and managing ESG and managing sustainability issues that impact value creation. So these are, how a CFO engages really is up to them as to how engaged they want to be in value creation. The way AICPA and CIMA are looking at it is, we want to enable finance professionals to engage at the strategic level, at the get-go, looking at stakeholder engagement, looking at ecosystem evaluation, really able to identify material ESG factors, integrate them into the business model, really understand the impact of strategy, and how strategy needs to address and change based on ESG. And all these factors, we are partnering with the Saïd Business School in Oxford. And we will be launching a course for CFOs and senior professionals to understand that strategic view, the stakeholder engagement, the ecosystem evaluation, being able to integrate ESG into your business model, etc. So we are identifying that there is this need, and we want to respond to that need. And so partnering with the Oxford universities is really, really exciting for us. And you could just Google, if you're interested in that course, that will be launching in Q3 of this year. And I would highly recommend that to the senior leaders. And then we're also looking at enabling the operationalization of ESG. So that means, how do you go about writing up an ESG policy, implementing an ESG policy, having a risk and management and the governance around ESG and ESG metrics and KPIs and targets. Also looking at how financing and investment decisions are impacted, because when you're looking at CapEx, so fundamentally, if finance is helping, and we position ourselves as business partners, right? So we help in business decision making. We are co-pilots in business decision making, and that's the role of finance. We are engaging with the business in making these business decisions. So if you look at decision making, there are fundamentally two major decisions, short, medium term, and then there's the long term. Short, medium term is more about allocation of budgets. What should we be spending our budget on that creates and maximizes value for the year? And then there's capital allocation on the longer term. Where should we be investing our capital in order for the organization to maximize value creation? And so all of that decision making, both short, medium term, and the long term, is now suddenly impacted by sustainability. And so that operationalization also requires new competencies. And at the strategic level, we've addressed it through the Oxford program, and then we will also be creating and curating courses within our professional qualification, within CIMA, to address the competencies at the operational level in order to implement and really enable in that short, medium-term decision-making as well. So these are the various angles and levels at which we are looking at the need for a finance professional to go beyond what we currently do, and enabling them to reinvent their own function, reinvent themselves, and really participate in a massive opportunity that I said. And that's how I would recommend CFOs look at it.
No, it is exciting for what I guess I see it as well from what it means for society as a whole, because I don't think anyone could watch the news or, without having some concern about what is happening to our planet in general and the impact it's having on the world. So it is exciting to hear that it is moving, and that, governments and standard boards are responding in a way and at pace. But yeah, I think what is going to surprise a lot of people is how quickly this is going to come through and the big impact. And watch this space, I think, to all of our CFOs and those working in finance, because it is going to come up a lot quicker than I think we realize or anticipate.
Absolutely,
as well.
Hannah. Think about it this way, from a profession point of view, as accountants, we really can position accountants and draw fresh talent, because the interest in accounting, we must admit, has been waning. We all read reports about the shortage of accountants and, young people not wanting to become accountants. This really, again, gives us an opportunity to position the accounting profession as a profession that can once again come to save the world, just in terms of, how we engage with ESG and how we enable our organizations and how we can attract new talent and the younger talent to think about, because they're all purpose driven. The generation that is coming through, Generation Alpha and, the Gen Z. If we present accounting as a profession that enables you to really participate in saving the planet and engage in a purpose that is really beyond themselves, it's a really attractive proposition, because you can really impact how an organization responds to ESG and sustainability by being a sustainability accountant, or by being in finance that is responsible for sustainability management. So I really look at it even in terms of the future of the profession and the attractiveness of the profession. And if you think about accounting becoming all the way from purpose to performance. So it's not just about performance. It's not just about driving performance, but it's connecting the whole circle from purpose to strategy, to delivery and operations, to business performance, and really integrating that in within the profession. It's a fantastic opportunity for us, and that's how we're looking at it as well, Hannah.
That is a wonderful visual to leave everybody on. So I can literally see it in my head, even though for those that are listening to the podcast, there's no pictures that Ash is popping up, but it's a great way to think. And I think purpose-driven finance is a really interesting concept, and perhaps topic for another podcast.
Absolutely.
So I want to say a massive thank you, Ash. As usual, you are a font of knowledge, and you pulling out some of those technical dates for me. I genuinely appreciate it. And if people want to learn more about what CIMA and what AICPA are doing around ESG, where is the best place to go and to find out?
Okay, so I'll give you the website, and then perhaps you can post it on the link as well, Hannah. The address is cgma.org/topics/sustainability. And if you put that in the link, that will take you to all the resources we have on ESG.
So don't you worry, podcast listeners, right? If you cannot remember that website address, it's not an issue. I will pop it into the podcast notes, along with a link to Ash's LinkedIn profile, because he's, it's well worth keeping an eye on his feed. He's always posting fabulous content. I must admit, I do read it and keep an eye on what he's up to. So I want to say a massive thank you, Ash. As usual, it's been lovely to have you on the show. Thank you for joining me, especially because of the time zone differences and everything, and for sharing all your knowledge about, and also the excitement about what ESG could mean for finance. So thank you, Ash.
Hannah, thanks very much. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for having me on CFO 4.0.